The State Department issues immediate widespread pause on foreign aid from Politico. The stop work orders appear to apply to U.S. aid for all countries except for Israel and Egypt. This ought to be great. Secretary of State Marco Rubio halted spending Friday on most existing foreign aid grants for 90 days. The order, which shocked State Department officials, appears to apply to funding for military assistance to Ukraine, which I think is a positive. Rubio's guidance issued to all diplomatic and consular posts requires department staffers to issue stop work orders on nearly all existing foreign assistance awards, according to the document, which was obtained by Politico. It is effective immediately. It appears to go further than President Donald Trump's recent executive order, which instructed the department to pause foreign aid grants for 90 days, pending review by the secretary. It had not been clear from the president's order if it would affect already appropriated funds or Ukraine aid. What do you guys think about stopping foreign aid? Personally, I love the idea of ending all foreign aid because just like I think that when you give individuals money, you turn them into wards of the state and you make them dependent on the state. I think when you give other countries foreign aid, I think that it does make them dependent on the United States. I will say the one I think positive argument about foreign aid is when you have as much stupid debt as the United States does and you give foreign countries dollars, that incentivizes them to spend the dollars and use the dollars, meaning that your currency is going to be propped up by that, as opposed to people stop using it. If they have the money and it's valuable or they see value in it, they're going to spend it, and that's good for the propping up the dollar. Now, that's not saying that I like the idea of foreign aid. I think that it's a net negative, but at least I want to talk about some of the arguments that people would consider a pro. But what are we thinking here? Is there anybody here? Alad, what do you think about foreign aid, man?
I think foreign aid is an important foreign policy that we have in our country. Having said that, I think for way too long, American foreign aid has been taken for granted and been taken advantage of by other countries. And every single, all foreign aid that we are giving out to people does need to be reevaluated for how important and useful it is to advance American policy objectives around the world.
That's a good question. I mean, look, stopping the foreign aid thing, it's always going to come with an exception, right? And I think right now there's 3 countries that are. Am I incorrect that it's still 3 countries that are an exception?
Egypt and Israel.
It was Egypt and
I know
Jordan.
it's Egypt, Jordan, and Israel, right?
But I think that
just all just saying Israel.
So I heard this story the other day. I think it was 2 or 3 days ago, and I don't know. And this particular piece that CNN is reporting, or Politico is reporting here. This is actually new today. So last I heard, it was Egypt, Jordan, and Israel. I don't know if it's still Jordan. I think that there's an update because it said that the proposal was from Trump originally, and then what Marco Rubio did actually goes further than what Trump was talking about. But go ahead. I don't mean to cut you off.
No, yeah. Look, and these things could be changing live as we go. I mean, there's a bridge that collapsed in Pennsylvania, a bridge that collapsed in Maryland. The point is, it's kind of sad that the state of our infrastructure, the bridges are collapsing, right? And there's more than one, and then that's the issue. So with something like this too, it feels kind of similar. It's like, okay, well, Egypt and Israel, let's be honest, it's the same foreign aid package if you really look at our objectives. Some people could argue in favor of that, right? Could say, well, I mean, this is where we're objectively giving to an ally. I mean, obviously, I would probably, be on the other side of the camp, and I would disagree that this is an ally. I think allies don't just take, that they give back a lot, particularly in your times of need. But we don't see a lot of the two-way giving in the way I'd like to see, per se. So, I mean, I understand that a lot of people are really sold out for Israel, either spiritually. I know that there's a lot of people that are captured, ideologically outside of, people blame AIPAC for everything. Some people are just Protestant Christians, which I think people really dismiss in this country. And I understand that it's probably really easy to keep the money flowing there. And there's so much political lobbying. I mean, Israel pays too much money to politically lobby to give up their foreign aid. So to me, I still think this is a win. I know people are going to hate me for this, but it's like, look, if we even got the political lobbying cornered enough with Qatar and other nations that we were able to melt down our foreign aid down to at least 2 countries. Am I happy with it? Is it perfect? But this is my opinion on the people that are constantly negative about this Trump administration. Yeah, Trump's a Zionist. He's open about it. And he's not going to stop supporting Israel. And if you thought you were voting for him and that's what he's going to do, he's not. He's also not bringing about the Fourth Reich. And he's not a white nationalist. And he's not a white supremacist. And he's not a national socialist. He's a centrist. And he said during his inauguration that he's bringing about colorblind meritocracy. It's the most fence-sitting, bullshit that you could possibly say if you were trying to be right-wing. He's a
He's still a
moderate.
90s Democrat.
Well, yeah, he's just a moderate guy. But unfortunately for us, it's like, things have gone so far left that even just pulling towards some common sense, I'm going to say, as someone who would be considered staunchly right, I still celebrate the win towards the center. And so even if I could sit here and say, yeah, I'm not happy that we're still giving $5-6 billion to these countries who are politically lobbying us, and it shows you we don't have full control of our government. The fact if we can even get the fire contained 30 or 40%, I don't want to be one of those guys that's just, this isn't a win because we didn't get all of our countries.
So yeah, I'm of the mindset that is, if any money that the government doesn't spend is a victory, because the government is always not just spending money, it's always increasing spending. I think it's a big win because of the fact that we are not giving money to Ukraine, that's been the biggest consumer of American foreign aid for the past 2 years, definitely. I'd love to see foreign aid stopped going to Israel and to Jordan and to Egypt and all. Like I said, I'm just overall, I think that foreign aid is a net negative.
When it comes to foreign aid, I do think we're missing a little bit of the forest for the trees, I think is the saying, because beyond America supporting other countries financially and sending arms, we run the world economy, and the backbone of the world economy is based off of Americans' ability to police the seas and allow free trade to occur. So if Americans weren't willing to subsidize free trade globally, it wouldn't exist and the world system would collapse. We have troops all throughout Asia right now that act in a way of foreign aid. And people often ask, why? Why do we have this foreign policy of trying to support many of these other nations? It's because if we didn't, then the world order would look completely different. If the American military wasn't there to help support South Koreans now with troops stationed there would likely be war to continue there. If we don't send money to Egypt, the Egyptian government would likely collapse. If we don't continue to support NATO, which people tend to overlook, then Russia will definitely encroach more on Eastern Europe. How do I know that?
And I said, I don't know that I believe that. I think they'd go after Ukraine, but I don't know that they're looking.
So I think there's a reason that other countries like Finland and Sweden, I believe, decided to join NATO after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I think Russian ambitions in Eastern Europe are obvious and clear.
There's like NATO lobbyists and expansionists who have this other.
I think it's within our interest to help prop up the American world order that we continue to benefit from.
Is it Switzerland changing a centuries old dogma and suddenly supporting Ukraine in a conflict? I mean, that doesn't.
Why do you
strike
think Finland joined NATO?
That isn't. Okay, well, first of all,
Switzerland actually is supporting Ukraine.
Switzerland got out of neutrality.
NATO.
Well, they got out of neutrality on Ukraine. Yeah, and I'm not going to go to the details. You can look that up. But in terms of their idea of their support, they were vocal. There was politicians. It completely broke composure. That threw me off too. When Swiss politicians. It threw me off. I don't know if Switzerland ended up ever giving arms, or they ended up. Did they?
They both joined NATO, but why do you think
so
these
they ended
countries?
Up siding with Ukraine.
Why do you think these countries are feeling compelled to join NATO?
Okay, that is a very long, very short and simple. I think that there is, just like we have AIPAC lobbying in our government, I think there's NATO lobbying. I think this has to do with unification and military expansionism in the military-industrial complex. The more NATO countries that they lobby to get in, then they have to buy the weapons from our military-industrial complex companies. This is about continuing the war machine. I don't think it's because Finland wanted to or was better off, and I don't think Switzerland was better off.
I think it's better off for Finland's defense.
I think they're in greater danger.
Obviously.
I think being a neutral border country would create actually more strength for them, because Finland could then, in many ways, play both allies to both countries and say, well, we're a net neutral, we'll buy from both, and they might be able to negotiate for cheap gas. You have countries competing to bring sovereignty into the nation and to give them all the resources they want at an exchange rate that would be beneficial to the people. I'm just saying, I don't think certain countries joining NATO is beneficial, and particularly, I don't think NATO is beneficial to the United States, considering how little people pay for their own protection.
I think you talk about a lot of these things very ominously because you're missing like the most obvious answer to these questions. So why would Finland want to join NATO and have access to the best weapons on Earth to help deter a potential future invasion? That's why these countries want to join NATO, because they feel threatened and they know that NATO is one of the most
Did they
powerful
need to join?
defensive.
Ukraine's not NATO, and
no,
they're getting
not,
a lot
but
of
they
money.
They wanted to be.
They wanted to be.
I know, but they didn't, and they're still
but
getting
you
the
need to
weapons. So
understand,
what does that tell the
Elijah,
rest of people? You don't have to join NATO to get
You
protected.
want access to the best weapons on planet Earth and the guarantee from the United States that they'll defend you because you were scared of countries invading you. Like, I think it makes a lot of
Why
sense.
would you be afraid if you were neutral and had good foreign
Why are you
relations with a
afraid?
nation?
Because Russia is very bellicose in invading its neighboring countries.
Maybe because they're cozying up and the government is becoming radicalized towards a pro-NATO, not even a pro-West, because the West doesn't need NATO in its current form. In fact, it's been radicalized. We've continually violated our pacts. We're expansionists, and we've actually been provoking Russia.
We're expansionist, but Russia is invading Ukraine. But is Russia expansionist?
Okay, the U.S. never even invaded Iraq or Afghanistan.
We weren't trying to expand our country in that way. But Elijah, no, I'm trying to understand. Do you believe that Russia is an expansionist? Do you think Putin has expansionist ambitions in Ukraine?
I think it's unification. I don't think it's expansionism.
think it's unification.
Yeah, I do. I do.
It's outrageous.
I do.
Well,
I believe that.
I mean,
I believe
so
that
you
they're
don't
very.
believe in any of the sovereignty of Ukraine, or
I do not believe in Eastern Ukraine sovereignty. No.
Eastern Ukraine sovereignty?
Yeah. I don't believe so.
So not the Donbass. What part of Ukraine is sovereign? Not Crimea, not Donbass, but what about the rest of it? West Ukraine, if you will.
Well,
Not that I've ever heard such a term.
I mean, I'm not a geopolitical. I'm not deciding the borders of the countries, but I do know the Russian ethnic people who already decided or voted to secede and to join Russia, and also to give themselves Russian passports. I think they have the right to secede and join Russia. So I do believe, especially with all the shelling.
Do they have
from
the right to
Western
join
Ukraine,
NATO if that's what they want to do?
Do they have the right? Why would you ask me if I have?
No, because you're saying they
authority to
could.
decide
You're
whether
saying the
Russia
people in
or
the
Ukraine
Donbass
has
or what
the right.
have you have the right to say that if they want to be a part of Russia,
everyone
they could
has
be a part
the
of
right to
Russia.
do whatever the
But
hell
if
they
the
want. I'm
Ukrainians
not
vote to
finished.
join NATO, do you think they should be able to join NATO? If
Do
they
I
want
think
to,
they should be able to?
If
the U.S. is paying for NATO, I don't believe the U.S. should allow them. But you asked me if they should be allowed to. If they want to, they should be allowed to want to join. I can't stop Ukraine, but I think the U.S. should block Ukrainians from joining NATO. They should have. I think we could have avoided this war if we had been stricter in demilitarizing and actually trying to lower tensions. This war was avoidable. I also think Putin
I think
was
that's so
dumb,
naive. You
but I
want to
think Putin was dumb.
demilitarize Ukraine, and
I
that's
do-
going to stop Russia
no, but
from
I do
invading.
think Putin
It's
was
like
dumb as well.
It's the most backwards way to think
No,
of it.
it's not though. It's not. If you look at the expansion of NATO, I do believe this current conflict, especially when you talk about the U.S. literally waging a coup inside of Ukraine about 11 years ago now, and then also with the annexation of Crimea, this has been cooking for. This is a war that's been going on for over 10 years. It escalated with an invasion into what Ukraine calls sovereign territory, but what Russia sees as its own and its own citizenry. It's not a black and white picture. I don't think there's anything. I couldn't say wrong. Like, I have no authority. It's like, well, what do you think? Finland can't want to be NATO? Dude, I'm not finished. I have no. I have no.
We're the leaders of
freaking
NATO,
clue.
so I mean.
No, I know. I have no freaking clue. I don't live in Finland. I don't know what their domestic and internal problems are, and why they would want to. I know why other countries, or why we've expanded. I know what lobbying happened from the military-industrial complex to try to convince and lobby politicians so that they would be able to buy our weapons to keep our imports and our exports up on our weaponry, because they have to buy our weapons and NATO-approved weaponry. I know that, and I'm saying I don't believe that the expansion of NATO was really about protecting Europe. I do think it was about money and power.
Elad, do you think that Ukraine should be allowed to join NATO?
I think if Ukraine was in NATO, Russia would not have attacked.
That's not what I asked. Do you think that Ukraine should be allowed to join NATO?
At this point, no, because they're in a conflict, and you need to settle all your border disputes if you want to be a part of NATO.
You think that they should have been allowed to join before Russia invaded? And by Russia invaded, I mean after the 2014 election shenanigans and
so I think
stuff.
because of the election shenanigans is when Putin sent the famous little green men.
Yes.
And that's what they had a border dispute following that.
Yep.
And if you have a border dispute and have an open conflict going on, we don't want to bring you in because we don't want to be dragged into that.
So then prior to that, do you think they should have been allowed to join Ukraine? So say that in the 90s when Russia, when it was like, look, we got to get these nukes out of Ukraine. And the United States made agreements that said we'll protect you from Russia if you give up the nukes. Do you think they should have been allowed to join NATO then?
There were some other stipulations, like the issue of corruption and different things like that. But yeah, I think it would be a good thing. And if they met, I think now Trump wants it to be like 5% of GDP. Yeah, I think they would have made a great ally.
Really?
Just like how Poland is one of the best NATO allies currently. They contribute something like 4.8% of GDP to military spending, and they help contribute to making NATO such a powerful force. And you'll actually notice the further east you go with NATO allies, you'll see them spending a higher percent of GDP on military. And why all of this is, we don't need to put our heads in the sand if we pretend we don't know what's going on. They're all more nervous about a Russian invasion as opposed to the French.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.